Hi, everyone. Hi, Rowena, and thank you for asking me to talk about my book and my research and inviting me to this conversation. I'm Claudia Yaghoobi, and currently I am a Roshan Institute Associate Professor in Persian Studies at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. I received my PhD in comparative literature and feminist studies from the University of California at Santa Barbara in 2013. And generally speaking, my research concerns Persian literature and culture, and my focus is on the members of sexual, ethnic, religious, gender, minoritized populations and populations that have been marginalized by normative discourses and hegemonic narratives. And I try to look at cultural productions in Iran, especially in modern Iran, to see how artists, authors, directors, if it's concerning cinema, challenge and critique this social hegemonies. My first book, which was titled Subjectivity in Attar, Persian Sufism and European Mysticism, was published by Purdue University Press in 2017. And this was a revision and reconfiguration of my dissertation, which reassesses the significance of the concept of transgression and construction of subjectivity within select works of the Persian medieval Sufi poet Farideddin Attar Neyshaburi. And in this work, I trace the intersections of transgression, law, inclusion, exclusion, self, and the other in Attar's treatment of gender, sexuality, class, and religion. But my new book, which was published in March 2020, right around the time that COVID-19 hit us, and, and this is
Oh,
the
wow.
book.
That's amazing. Beautiful cover as well.
Yeah,
A
let
good
me
thing
tell
to come out of COVID, basically.
you. Yeah. Yeah, it's my second monograph, and it is titled Temporary Marriage in Iran, Gender and Body Politics in Modern Iranian Film and Literature, which examines the representation of temporary marriages or Sigheh marriages and temporary wives, that is Sigheh wives in modern Iranian cultural productions. And by modern Iranian cultural productions, I mean, I looked at the Pahlavi era and after the Islamic Revolution, and I looked at specific novels, even though I did research on over 50 novels and short stories.
Wow.
I ended up with 5 fictional works and from the Pahlavi era, and then 2 cinematic works from the Islamic Republic. And in this work, although I focus on the practice or the institution of temporary marriage in cultural productions, I move beyond cultural productions and I look at this controversial institution, basically sociocultural or um, also religious institution that has captured the imagination of Western observers and is not very much favored by Iranian feminists. The
Mm.
cover of the book, I'll show it again,
Yeah,
is titled,
beautiful.
it is titled, what is it, Unsung Melodies or something like that. It is a work by Iranian American artist, female artist Manzar Rasuli, who graciously, gave me permission to use it as the cover of my book. And I was very persistent and I was insisting to use an Iranian female artist's work
Good.
on my as the cover of the book.
Very appropriate.
And it's very interesting when she sent me a couple of of her works.
Mm.
Um, this even the title of the I think it's Unheard Melodies. It's the title of the work also captured me because I think the stories of Sigheh women
Mm.
actually are the unheard melodies.
No, it's
and
true.
and I was trying basically to give voice to Sigheh women, and
Hmm.
this sounded very appropriate.
Very,
So in
very.
addition to all of this, I'm also the co-editor of a book series which is titled Sex, Marriage, and Family in the Middle East for um, former IB tourists, current Bloomsbury
That's
Press,
right.
yeah, with Professor Janet Alfari. So we solicit books if anyone wants to send us.
Oh, good. Okay. I hope people hear this and send something interesting to you.
And it focuses on sex, marriage, and family in the Middle East.
So it's a wider net. Yeah, thank you so much, Professor, for your introduction, and you do an amazing job, sort of looking at these, dare I say, marginalized women, Sikh women, and I come from Malaysia, which is predominantly Sunni, and we look down on this practice of temporary marriage, seeing it as Shiite deviance, let's say, and so as an example of the Shiites being very different, very other. So even within the Muslim world, Sigheh has a very unfortunate and very negative reputation.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you look at that at all in your work about how the Sunni world views Sikh marriages. Um,
I don't specifically look at the way that Sunni communities look at Sikh marriages, but I do make references very briefly to variations of Sikh marriages, like Mesyar, for example, marriages in Sunni
yes.
communities, but
Okay.
not anything, deep.
Of course, no, that's fine. I was just very curious because I know from my own culture that we have this connotation of Sikh marriages and Sikh women as unfortunately seen as prostitutes, and that's how they're viewed, unfortunately. So
Yeah,
I think it's
and part of
interesting.
the larger argument that I make in the book is basically looking at these two different regimes, the
Mm,
Pahlavi and the Islamic Republic, to see whether or not the measures taken by each regime has, diminished the stigma
mm, mhm,
associated with Sikh marriages, or rather they perpetuated the same
mm,
discussions and conversations. And
very
even though
interesting.
one regime was very, kind of quiet, there was silence
Hmm.
in Pahlavi Era. The state didn't want to, interfere with what
Right.
clerics favored. And then during the Islamic Republic, it was encouraged and praised, and by the
Mm,
state. So does these different stances taken by the different regimes and the measures taken, like policies, everything, um, change anything for
right.
Sikh women and what they go through. And I didn't find any changes, honestly,
Interesting.
in those terms.
Hmm.
The changes that I found was in women themselves, like women after the Islamic Republic, as we all know. I mean, in terms of education, women are more educated now. They're more aware. We have they're more aware of their rights. So
Yeah.
in terms of employment, independence, and all of those. So the difference, looking at the cultural productions of Pahlavi era, where we have all these women who enter Sikh marriages out of most often it was financial necessity, and there were sometimes to save family honor, or
Mm,
family pressure to get
right.
married. During the Islamic Republic, we have a different representation of this independent women that sometimes the works that I looked at, they don't enter because of financial need. It was because they wanted to exercise their autonomy and their agency, and maybe sexual desire, and
Mm-hmm.
fulfilling some
Mm-hmm.
sort of desire, in some of them, even like motherhood.
Mm. It's interesting
Even
how that
though
narrative.
those concepts of like desiring motherhood was also like this socially constructed ideas
Idea,
that
right, right.
carved
Mm-hmm.
into the
Mm-hmm.
psyche and the minds of
Mm-hmm.
women,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
these independent women gave into those ideas, but
Mm-hmm.
in terms of entering Sigheh marriages, it wasn't because of financial need.
It's interesting how that narrative has changed, and sort of the need
Yes.
for it has changed as well. And maybe we can talk a little bit about your research journey, and how the research was for you when you were writing this book. But and in a way to start that, I would like to ask: was there a reason why you chose films for the Islamic era and writings for the Pahlavi era?
So I did, part of this research for this book was in the archives of the National Library.
Right.
And while looking at the archives, the fictional works that I found that had been produced under the Islamic Republic, um, they are either like propaganda stuff that, if
Mm-hmm.
they are published, and
Mm-hmm.
if you find a work, I mean, if you can't, you can't even find a work. If a work is written that critiques Sigheh marriages because it is endorsed by the state, it won't
Right.
be published. It won't
Got you.
be,
I understand.
so
Interesting. Okay.
I couldn't find any works because I wanted that critique of this social
Mm-hmm.
hegemony that is going on. So I couldn't find anything that would work with my, agenda for this book.
Got you.
Um, Even though there are works, and especially in popular romance, but
Mm-hmm.
to me it was reinforcing what the state is, publicizing and endorsing, so I didn't use them. And even
I
these two
understand.
cinematic works are not necessarily great, um, works of cinema or film study in terms of film studies, but
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted the topic, and the topic also is very kind of conflicting and controversial within the film itself.
I see.
And both of the directors are interestingly directors who were supporters of Khomeini and Islamists at the beginning of the
Mm,
revolution. But
right.
then with this wave of disillusioned,
Mm,
Islamists, they were part of that wave who started critiquing the the outcome or the trajectory of the
I got
revolution.
that. I see. That's very interesting. No, thank you for that. What was your biggest surprises and
Sure. So I'll start from the very beginning.
yeah, let's
And
hear
I'm going to tell you a funny anecdote.
that. Okay.
So obviously, having lived for over 30 years in Iran, I knew about Sigheh marriages, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Much of my life was after the Islamic Revolution
Mm-hmm.
and the endorsement of Sigheh marriages and temporary marriages.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you know about this, but I was a tenured professor at the Azad University in
Yes.
Iran,
Mm-hmm.
and for many years. And as an Armenian with a more liberal upbringing, different
Mm,
from my Muslim colleagues,
Mm-hmm.
I had very close friendships with all of my colleagues, including my male colleagues at the university. But
Right.
this was very surprising and,
Mm-hmm.
strange for our students because not they didn't necessarily know, my upbringing or
I see.
background.
Mm-hmm.
So I was a very good I was good friends with one of my male colleagues, and then
Mm-hmm.
we heard rumors going like being spread and going around on campus that we have contracted Sigheh. That's
Ah.
why that's why
No.
we are so close, and
Oh
we
no.
always hang out with each
Oh,
other.
that's why.
Yeah. So
Oh, I
it
see. That's so
this
funny.
idea was so intriguing for me. That
Hmm.
it didn't even cross my mind at the time because I don't make any differences between male and female
Right.
friends.
Yeah, sure.
And then my students' idea of friendship was different, and then the label,
Interesting.
yeah, that they used to justify our relationship. Like my
That's
students
interesting.
were trying to legitimize my relation.
That's it's quite
So
sweet of them in a way.
I know they really liked me, I think,
I think
because of
so.
that. And then another
Interesting.
very interesting thing, now that we're
Oh.
talking about students, was one day one of them came to me and actually asked me privately that, are you, dating blah blah professor?
Oh. Oh.
And because because I knew their, mindset,
Yeah,
um, students, at that time, yeah,
sure.
bourgeois thinking and all of that. So I
Mm-hmm.
just turned back to her and I said, do you think as a professor, I would date another professor with the same income? And
That's a
she
good
was like,
answer.
oh my God, you are right. No, you shouldn't.
You
So
see,
that
you,
was
you switched it. You switched it. You switched
yeah.
it around.
I
That's
mean, you just have
funny.
to go with their mentality and the
Sure,
mindset
exactly.
that
Yeah, that's
because
interesting.
that's
Yeah,
how
yeah,
they
yeah.
at
That's how they're
that time.
thinking.
Yeah.
That was the popular. Ah. That's funny.
So back to Sigheh, when I started my graduate program in
Right.
2008,
Mm-hmm.
the first class that I took with Professor Janet Afari was in
Sure.
2010, and it was Gender in the Middle East. And it
Okay.
was in this class that we read Professor Shahla Ha'eri's groundbreaking work, Law of
Hmm.
Desire and Temporary Marriage. And this was my first exposure to like academic official
Right.
language about Sigheh,
Mm-hmm.
because I had lived hearing stories
Mm-hmm.
and watching TV and
Yeah,
popular
yeah.
culture and everything, but I had not read anything academic or scholarly about it.
I
So
see.
and then I decided to write my final research paper for the course on
Oh.
this topic. And that's when I noticed that there was huge silence about the topic, in particularly in cultural studies. And
Mm.
that is why I started working on the topic. And since then, I presented and wrote, articles. And
Yes, yes.
in 2010, during that same semester, I presented my research paper, which I wrote about سفر اسمت با Ibrahim Golestan
Mm-hmm.
in a graduate student symposium during that semester. And then that became a chapter of my book. Right
Ah,
now,
okay.
it's a chapter. And then for the same paper in 2014, I received the Hamed Shahidian Critical Feminist Award from Iranian Women's Studies Foundation.
Great.
In
Congratulations.
that Thank you. And then, the research and the work started. So between 2015 and 2017, I did a lot of archival work
Mm-hmm.
to narrow down which fictional works I want
Right.
to focus on. And then in 2016, I published another article on Sadegh Chubak's Gohar in Sang Sabur. No, this was in 2018. In 2016, I published on Shokaran, Sima in Shokaran. So I published a couple of articles and presented in different conferences, received feedback, multiple conversations, and the initial project went through, massive transformations and evolved into what we have in its current form as the book.
It's
But
quite a journey.
some of the surprises was, for example, um, during this journey, one surprise was, which was not very like a huge surprise, but still it was surprising that I couldn't find any fictional works published under the Islamic Republic.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah.
Another surprise was the fact that all the works that I picked, and I picked them because they used Sigheh marriage as their main topic, not as sub-theme or, subplot. They are written and directed by men. So I
That's
struggled
true.
with that. I struggled with that a lot. And that's why the epilogue to the book is me thinking through. It's not even me justifying or trying to give a solution, but it's me thinking through, this the fact that I struggled, that there are no women. Of course there are women who refer to Sigheh marriages briefly in their works. We have Shahnush Parsipur, we have references, for example, in Farrokhzad's works. But for my purposes, that I wanted to analyze like deeply and in depth as one chapter, it wasn't enough.
I see. That's interesting.
Another interesting thing was that because this research started in 2010 and the book was published in 2020, it took 10 years because at the same time I was working on my dissertation and
Of
the
course.
first book. These two works were parallel. That's why it took so long.
Of course.
However, during all this time, there were times that I would find material on like online newspaper pieces or online, material that I could use for Sigheh from Iran. And then I would come back and it had been taken down. So
Ah,
at the last stage of the preparation of the book, when it was going for print, we had to, with my copy editor, we had to go through all the
oh
links
gosh.
and the websites to see if they are,
Still
available.
working. Oh my
And
gosh.
some of them
Wow.
were not available
Oh
because I had
dear.
found that one of them, for example, in 2015, 2016.
Mm,
And then I had to find another link that would address the same question I was talking about. And one of the things was also that was being constantly taken down was the film Zendegi Khususi, or the
oh,
private
as
life.
well.
Multiple times I had to look for it, and then I couldn't, for a
Yeah.
long time, it was not available anywhere.
Interesting. Is it
Yeah.
because the conversation around CK is so controlled by the state?
Exactly. Exactly.
Wow.
And both these films that I used, even though
Mm-hmm.
they were directed in Iran and
Mm-hmm.
they were screened for a very brief time,
Right.
like a couple weeks, and then there was strong backlash and they were taken
Mm.
down.
Very difficult. And I was just curious about how CK plays a role in activism, in feminist activism in Iran. Is it very much used by feminists in Iran as a way to show suppression, as a way to show male patrimony? It is,
Um,
yeah.
Yes, it is. And there have been, especially in the past, 40 years, there have been periods where we've had, you know, that we've had policy changes, for
Sure.
example, such as in 2007 with Ahmadinejad's, presidency. There were a couple of changes and reforms
Mhm.
proposed to the family protection law, and a couple of bills, including a couple of articles in the bill, including Article 22 and 23, which talked about marriage and dowry, and then
Mhm.
Sigheh marriages and the registration of Sigheh marriages. And there was huge backlash
Right.
from the feminists, including Shirin Ebadi, and
Right. Mhm.
a lot of feminists we know, who had demonstrations and who had
Mhm.
meetings, and there were so many discussions and conversations around that bill that it took the bill until 2013, from
Wow.
2007 to 2013 for it to pass, and
Okay.
which ultimately it passed.
Okay, in the end. But it's interesting that it went through that journey and that there was a conversation in a way. No, thank you for that. I mean, the contribution and significance of this book is obvious, and I think it's something because there isn't much written anyway in English about temporary marriage, and the way you've brought in literary and cinematic works. I think it's an important book. And what are your hopes for the book and how it is read and where it's read?
So as you say, there isn't much written in the, especially in the
Mm,
field of like cultural studies.
mm,
However, even in the other areas that it's been written, it's we have the groundbreaking work of Professor Haeri,
mhm,
which I mean I owe tremendously to her work and her research. And then I've had conversations with her about my book. She's read parts of my
mhm.
work. I mean, she's read all of it because she endorsed the book.
Wow.
But the other works, such as Professor Afari, Professor
Mhm,
Hufar, Professor Najma Badi, they do amazing work on female sexuality and female body, and do refer to Sigheh, but it wasn't the main topic of their book. So situating my work in conversation, in this context, in conversation with all these um, other women's rights activists,
mhm,
scholars, and feminist historians, my hope was basically to contribute to the same conversation about
mhm,
the larger discourse about the female body and sexuality, rather
mhm,
than just specifically Sigheh. But I was using Sigheh as my focus to
mhm,
discuss a larger conversation, and
mhm,
to show that the female body in different times period, in terms of politics, if we look at it, and the evolution of culture and society and all of that, in two
mhm,
different time periods that I examined in my work. Pahlavi era, we have the modernization,
mhm.
very liberal time period, and then we have the Islamic Republic. But in all of them, again, we see that the female body is being used
Yeah.
in different
Mm,
ways as a catalyst for the symbolic struggle between social, cultural, religious,
mhm,
sexual,
mhm,
political
mm.
forces, that ultimately all these forces define modern Iranian womanhood.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
beautifully.
that
Put that very
was
beautifully. Yeah.
that was my hope to contribute, that you know
Mm,
the larger conversations that all these scholars I owe um,
mm,
to. in terms of Sigheh, it's the same.
Very good. I think it's an important part of the conversation, I think, and it's definitely an important book
Yeah.
for anyone actually who works on modern Iran, even myself, even though I'm more of a historian and I look at international relations. It's extremely important, and so even as I said earlier, I'd read your prologue and I was quite hooked from the start, and it's true to see the female body as part of a part of modern Iranian politics. It's very
Mhm.
important. So thank you.
I mean,
And
it's
yes,
very, it's like on a daily basis, you see the
mm,
relevance of my argument
I think
because
so. Yeah, yeah,
very
definitely.
recently, for example, we had the honor killings of that were going on in Iran, and I
Mm,
was thinking, and it's just the same thing happening.
yeah.
Like
Mm,
that, it's in the context of honor killing, but this was
mm-hmm,
in the context of Sigheh marriages. But
mm-hmm.
ultimately, it's this female body that must be eradicated
Yeah,
to save
yeah.
the honor, or of this
Of
man.
men. Yeah. No, yes, I feel the same way. But yes, it's important to have that conversation, to have a proper study of that. So and it's an incredible contribution. Congratulations.
One thing that I
Yes,
wanted
yes,
to do was, you know, how you read about temporary marriage or Sigheh
yes,
marriages
sure.
in in the Western social media or news
Mm,
outlets, and it's
mm-hmm.
so romanticized, and
Yeah,
it's
that's
like this
true. Mm,
fantasized
mm,
practice. So I wanted to show a more like real
yeah.
picture or image of these marriages. And that's
Mm,
why every chapter that I'm looking at, I start with the historical time period, what was
mm-hmm,
going on, in terms of history, politics,
mm-hmm.
gender reforms,
Yeah,
sexuality, and then the author's other works, background, agenda.
and that's
So
helpful. Mm,
contextualizing everything, bringing cultural studies,
mm-hmm,
together with politics, gender studies, history,
mm-hmm,
everything, to show how whatever is, happening in one culture or in
mm,
some historical juncture or in terms of some policies
mm.
is reflected in the cultural productions of that time period.
That's very useful, actually. It helps to situate the stories and the films that you've chosen. But and sorry, films and books that you've chosen. So thank you for that, and thank you so much for your time. And just to end, perhaps I could ask, what are your next projects, and what will you write next? I know I shouldn't scare you about your next book already, but I'm curious of what do you have planned
Yeah,
ahead?
so I mean, as scholars, you yourself, know you're part of this conversation too. We always have multiple
Yeah,
works
interests and what's going on
at
at the same time.
interests and works at the same time. Um, but the major work that I'm focusing on right now, which started in 2012, the idea came to me in 2012, and then it evolved throughout the years. And again, I started by presenting at different
Mm,
conferences. The first time
mhm.
I think I presented was in 2016 AIS
In Vienna.
in Vienna,
Hmm.
and then published the same article. And then I have published two articles,
Mm,
which is tentatively titled Multiple Consciousness and Transnationalism in Iranian-Armenian Cultural Productions,
wow.
which is
Mm,
a project that examines the cultural productions of Armenians who lived
mm,
in Iran, because the living in Iran as Armenians, to me, is living in diaspora.
yeah.
So in terms
Mm-hmm.
of, minoritized population,
Mm-hmm.
diaspora population, and how they assimilated, and how these authors are trying to negotiate this
Mm,
minoritized self through their writings and basically carve a space for themselves in a society that considers them as the other.
Yeah. Interesting.
The other part of the project is these authors who left Iran after the two major waves after the revolution
Hmm.
and with the start of the Iran-Iraq war in 1980s.
Right.
So
Hmm.
my focus is the past 40 years. Even
Okay.
for the authors that are living, still living in Iran today,
Hmm.
I'm just looking at their works from the past 40 years. And then those who moved to America and to the United States,
Hmm.
I'm not looking at authors in Europe, just in the
Okay, just
US
in the US. Okay, that's fine.
in the US and what they produced in the US, because this added another consciousness to their diasporic
Mm.
self, because now they are
Mm.
twice the
The
stranger.
double other.
Yes.
Ah.
So it's really interesting. And one part that is very interesting is that just like other, Middle Eastern communities,
Mm.
Armenians are also legally considered Caucasian here, right? In the US.
Ah,
But
it's
then there was a
amazing.
time period that um, they were called the N word, but they were called
Oh,
white N word.
oh, really?
Yes, in
That's very
1900s.
confusing. Wow. Because they were
So
still considered different. Yeah,
I,
I
the
see.
different waves of Armenian migration to America, and then I
Mm.
look at the specific Iranian Armenians because they are coming from the Middle East
Hmm.
and the aftermath of 9/11, which
Hmm.
they were considered Middle Eastern rather than, you know, Armenian. So as
Ah,
terrorists
interesting.
included
Right.
in the group that was targeted and exposed to Islamophobia.
That's incredible. I look forward to hearing more about your research on this
Thank
topic.
you.
It's a very important one as well.
It's a calling for me from my ancestors.
Yeah,
I
I mean, we have to
really,
heed that call sometimes.
yeah, I really feel like because there are so many things that as an Armenian I had
Hmm.
no idea about.
Yeah,
And
yeah, it's
after
important.
reading all these works and
Yeah.
I'm just learning about my background and my
Hmm.
roots.
Yeah, that's it sounds like it's going to be quite an emotional experience as well. But that
Mhm.
makes, I don't know, I always find those make the best kinds of writing.
I
Yeah,
hope so.
I'm sure it will. But thank you so much, Professor, for your time. I hope I haven't taken up too much of your time, but I really enjoyed listening to you talk about your book. So I appreciate it a lot. Thank you.
Thanks to you for inviting me and reaching out. And I look forward to more collaborations with you.
Yeah, that'll be
Congratulations.
kind.